We're just about to start a talk about the story of art, the evolution of art, to where we are today from the very beginnings.
So those that are not familiar, I'm Curtis McConnell, and I am the CEO of Authentify Art. You may have seen these little cards going around, and you don't even know what they mean or why they're here. This is really our I don't know what this is our first sort of public event that we're doing as Authentify to talk about what we're doing in the art world. I want you to think about many people over the years have talked about democratizing art. We really see an amazing opportunity using technology to do what is truly or actually democratizing art. So some of the basic principles we all believe in, everything from truth and justice and equality. And we're really doing that by building a platform where we can all collectively fight corruption and build an art market that we really believe in. And for the past, I think it's 6 or 7 years ago, I wrote a white paper on this newfangled thing called blockchain and some of the things we could do for physical art. And the times have changed and digital art has caught up to be in the fine art realm. So for all of you people here who are probably big fans of NFTs, people will ask you, what's an NFT? I don't get it. I don't get it in art. Lots of fine art people say, I don't get it. I don't get it in art. Maybe it's not fine art. No, it's something. And what we want to do is quickly, and Theo Johns here, one of my partners in crime, is an expert on all fine art. And just give a bit of a context. So as you walk away from here, when people say it's not fine art, you can go, no, let me tell you the story of art and how NFTs are the next natural conclusion of where we started, let's start about 65,000 years ago.
Hi, welcome. In the history of art, the earliest known form of artistic imagery that has been discovered is on the left here, which is fragments of ostrich shell. And they have all been colored and inscribed. And these date from 65,000 years before the present day, which is today. So, we're talking about the beginning of humans interacting and developing an innovative technology. Now, innovative technology is the word that we're going to be using throughout this, because this is what the evolution of art basically is that at each stage of change and thing, behind every serious change has always been a new innovative technology. Here with the ostrich eggs, you can see that is somebody has been experimenting and we don't know precisely what they were trying to give the idea of, but they are obviously communicating in a way to show their newfound practice of what they can achieve. Then we move around to, you can.
So Theo will correct me here. I describe this as a big fish story right here. So everybody knows when you caught a fish and you hold the fish in front of you about this it was this big. It was, how big? That big. That's a life-size pig, is that right? Wild or a wild boar. So probably the first time somebody wanted to brag about the boar they killed, they drew it on the wall of a cave. So that's your first time. And maybe that became an avatar at one point. So this is the first time that we know of, 45,000 years ago, somebody actually decided to tell a story, and they used a full-size picture of this thing to try and at least tell the story in the future. So if you're like, I don't believe you, it's like, no, this is real time. We sketched it right here. And see, there's the handprint up the top just for size. Could have been like this, but who's asking? Any art details on that one, Theo?
I think what we want to see here is that this is the first human depiction of a real life object that was ever created. And as Curtis says, this is like a sort of a trophy. We think more of it being a sort of a translation of gratitude or of understanding that this animal is part of our lives, that is either something to feed us, to keep us warm, or to nurture us. So it's held highly. So it's a sort of idolatration in a sense.
So here we go. Some of you people have seen these things before, and it's not an art history class. But one of the things we talk about is you want to tell a story, but not just come back to my house and tell a story. Some people don't want to go back to my house. But this one you can put in public places. And when people look at this art, they think, oh, they weren't very talented artists. Well, no. Wait a second. These people, they built pyramids. They built some of the most amazing things. They were incredibly talented, but they wanted to tell their story in a certain way. Some of you may see some of the current NFTs. You may see some of the ape series and other things and go, well, that's not great art. What's this? This is amazing art. It's in 2 dimensions for the most part. It's using interesting imagery. We're looking at the same thing, guys. And this is a public way of displaying and telling a story. And this was a huge innovation, putting it in public places, not in my cave, somewhere else.
I think the art of storytelling has really taken off with the Egyptians by a pictorial form of language. And they were the masters of creating stories through imagery. And basically, as you find out later in the talk, we'll see we come sort of almost full circle again back to this.
So another thing, and I'm going to bring it back home every time. Sometimes people want to carry art around with them. You can't say, "Come, I'll carry my temple around with me," or come back to my place. So as we move forward, people started collecting. It's a new term here: collecting art, bringing it with them, and telling a story. Not trying to describe it, but literally showing it. They could carry it in their wallet, they can carry it in their pocket, carry it in their bag. And these are amazing things. They're telling stories. Some of them will be religious, some will be historical. Some will tell entire ways of communicating a message that they want to. So once again, these are innovations that came along. We're seeing this time and time again. This is fine art, just like everything else we're about to watch.
As we see from the beginning, we are using different mediums. First, it started off with the ostrich shells. Then we were finding out that we would be able to use carbon from the burnt sticks to draw on wall caves. Then people saw that they found ivory that they could carve, stone. And as each century passes, more and more mediums are being brought up, utilized, and created. So now we come into the beginning of the post-Christ period where religious art really took a hold. We're delivering stories of the story of the Bible in order to try and regulate the world that was being ever more populated. And here we are using new types of paints by using those pigments found in the burnt ashes of the fire, from the earth itself, from trees, from leaves, and being created using oils that had been invented as binders to apply them to the panels to make them survive and last. And then as time went on again, people were finding out new techniques of paintings, different brushes, different materials to use. In instance, canvases being used for the first time because people were realizing that wooden panels and rock were not that portable, and wooden panels became warped when humid or when wet. So we needed to find a new medium to paint on, to utilize, that wouldn't sort of stretch and bend and move as you move them around the country or the continent.
So once again, this may seem crude, but this is another innovation, right? We see a lot of Renaissance works transition from these panels and wood boards, and it's hilarious when you get to see X-rays of them. They have woodworms all the way through them, and they're warped and they're cracked and they're put back together. So this innovation of canvas, and it really came out of Venice, and it was an innovation that came part of the Silk Roads. They came up with a way of mass producing canvas so we could carry it around and share it with our friends. We could take it back home. We could go on a vacation and travel back. It's not quite a postcard, but it was the equivalent. So this is, once again, this become the most portable thing we have. So Sophie, you want to go on the next one?
So here we're moving into a period where this is the Northern Renaissance in Europe, and this is Jan van Eyck here with the marriage of Arnolfini. This is the new technique of looking at perspective, convex mirrors, capturing distorted spaces, being able to understand how to produce luminance using paints, create shadow, and use real-life colors using the pigments that were newly discovered from the hills of Afghanistan, the lapis lazuli and the blues, the greens from the from the ochres of the indigos, of the blues and everything. These were all being discovered, and as the population of the world became ever so greater, the trade routes opened up. People were able to access items from different parts of the world, and a network was starting to be created throughout the globe. here we have different imagery of, this is a woman artist, Artemisia Gentileschi in Italy. Quite rare to have a woman artist so famous at this particular point. She was able to obviously express her emotions in this, and this is a depiction of a quite a gory religious subject of Judith and Holofernes, and this is beheading him in the night as he sleeps. But this was an idea that people could really sort of present whatever type of story they wanted, whatever type of imagery, and adding drama to it at the same time, as opposed to the fixed images of the earlier times.
Just one of the themes I want to bring up here. A lot of people, when they think of art, they think of art galleries or they think of museums. They think of people with accents like Theo's over here. They think of people wearing ascots, and they feel like it's not approachable. This here is literally trying to give you a reaction. My daughter in the back there cringed when she saw the image. It connects with you emotionally, right? It's what you see in it. It's about having that emotional connection, whether it be sad or happy or thoughtful. One of the things I tell people in art is the art world somehow lost its sense of humor a while ago. You rarely see people in museums laughing or galleries laughing, and enjoying and really connecting emotionally. And what we want to show you throughout this whole show, and you'll see today, this emotional connection is one of the things that NFT as a medium and this digital art gives us. It's no longer stuck on a canvas. It's no longer reliant just on the most vivid pigments. Storytelling can be, on a work of art. It can be through a video. It can be through poetry. It can be all these things. So what in the past art was so compelling because it was the way to tell stories and people could immediately connect. And it wasn't necessarily what the artist said, it's what they connected with. So when we look at this, it's all about telling those stories and making these great connections. And when we look at the possibilities of where art takes us, if we look back, you're going to see the same thing over and over again, but you're going to find where we think, art goes is it becomes this amazing new medium. And then for those of you, some of you are younger, some are about my age, but there was a revolution in the music industry in the 80s, and it was called the music video. And I think NFTs are going to represent something even more revolutionary for art of how we experience and connect to it. So we'll keep moving here. So next.
So we now arrive at a time where a brand new concept of medium came about. And this is a medium that basically changed art history in a serious way. The invention of the wood block print and paper printing. This is the most famous artist known for utilizing this new technique. And Albrecht Dürer was the sort of the lead of the Northern Renaissance. And he thought to himself, how do I get my message to as many people as possible? And by using this technique, he could create one wood block carved by hand, which could print countless, endless copies on the paper. We have to remember that at the time, this would have been quite a shocking new revelation that one could do this, because nothing like this had ever been thought of. The concept was just not there until it came along. And just today, as we sort of develop the laser copy printer, this is inventing the laser copy printer of the 15th century. This enabled this message of art to reach further and further afield. And as other artists took up this technique, this traveling of different styles of art was first of all created throughout the globe. And people along the trails of trade would carry these with them. And as art evolved, it sort of picked up different ideas from different cultures. It started to immigrate across the globe, and people would be able to be exposed to different ideas, different techniques, different subjects, different imagery. And at the same time, this is when the printed book was being issued as well. So we're in a new world of where there's a deliverable. An art can be formed as a deliverable, and it can be expedited to other people.
So Theo's not going to talk about, so I will. So you may have read in the paper over the past 6 months, there was a Albrecht Dürer, a new one found, and it was found in a collection, I think, in Massachusetts. And I think it was bought for something, north of $15 and less than 100. And it turns out to be an original. And the company that's actually going to be selling this is a company called Agnew's, which is the oldest gallery in London in 1817. They're here at this conference. They're more than likely, and we're crossing our fingers, they're going to create the first ever NFT with images of some of these works, some of these amazing old masters, these amazing originals. These literally the innovation of the first time you could, see and broadcast, or dare I say, mint a print to the world. We're going to do it again. And I think this is one of these most amazing things. We connect, the history, the past with the future. And I think this is going to make, when you start understanding and see what's behind this, it will blow you away. So Agnew's will be presenting, I think, even in this dome today at 4 p.m., showing you a little bit of what they're doing. But as we say, I think it'll get incredibly exciting as people see where this goes. You can look at this even as graphic art, and the influences on it. So let's do the next one. I'll pick it up here from, so I'm more the engineer, but one of the things when people talk about art, this notion of realism or something that's realistic is people sort of think that's fine art. Well, this was the first time ever that people found a way to use lenses to basically trace and look at landscapes and create much more realistic with perspective. And they use technology to do it. When they started making copies in studios, they would use these. They would paint the original, and then they would use candlelight and project it on another canvas, and then paint it again. And then they have a whole studio of people creating these things. So it's basically, what is that? Control C, Control V is basically what they did, but much slower, right? So the copy paste, this is when it was invented, and this is the first time people saw it. So even when people talk about things like paintings that are famous paintings that we see today, Da Vinci's, that you think there's one, there's usually 3 or 4. They're often in private collections. The Mona Lisa, there's more than one out there. There are multiple that came out of his studio. We just happen to know one that's the most famous of them, but there are other ones around the world that you could see. So it's always fascinating when you see it. And some of them are what I consider legitimate copies. It was actually done in the studio, and other ones, let's call them studies. People copied, and that was a very common practice. And then there are others that we'll call fraud because people know they're not the originals and they're saying that they are. They're not. There's a lot of that out there. So when we look at this, copies can be good. Copies represented as being original is not good. And you may, once again, in the NFT space, we're seeing that catch on really fast. There's a lot of not original, not by the artist, copies and fakes out there. And in a great way technology has, it's leapfrogged the art world. The art world has about 40% fakes and frauds, 40% on the market. That's crazy. And the NFT, well, we're up to about 80% fakes and frauds at the moment, and going as fast as we can. So one of the things that we talk about is this is all solvable. There's actually relatively easy ways, and technology can solve these problems as well. And once again, with Authentify, it's just trying to give context to it and saying, let's solve it. Let's do it together. And it's, we're trying to make that happen.
Yeah, I think just to add on what Curtis was saying about this is a technique called camera obscura, and the image there is by Antonio Canaletto from Venice. Everybody will see that if you know your fine art museums, there's normally 1 or 2 of his works in every museum around the country and around the globe. He basically was, he cheated basically, he was doing painting by numbers, but because the effect was so incredible, and the way that he applied the paint on that paint by numbers, he built up a reputation of being, from a tourist painter on the canal side to being in some of the most famous collections around the world in all the aristocratic collections, and it became a sort of postcard art. But people were paying a lot of money for that postcard art back then, and even more today. So, this is an idea of how something so simple could have been produced, but its value is being distorted in a way just because of supply and demand, because of authority stipulating that this is important and this is beautiful. What is the aesthetics? How do we look at art, and how do we understand art? Today, we've been mainly sort of educated by museums as what we are led to believe is beautiful, and what has value. But we are at a moment now where we can dictate that, and we can say, actually, the artists themselves have the control to give out what is valuable and what is behind art. And for me and Curtis, it's all about the story behind art.
So this is a fun one. Not everybody likes to talk about the sort of details and what goes into making art. Don't kid yourself. Artists have always been experimenting, and some more than others, and some substances that, well, some of you may have had as well. But they're pushing the envelope. They're pushing, not necessarily what they think everybody else sees, but what they feel and what they see. And as we moved into art, this is a really interesting period moving, from the 19th to the 20th century of experimentation and challenging, norms and looking at the world in a different place and how we deal with it. So once again, these tend to connect with people really emotionally. And I think it's an amazing thing to see, what happened and where things are going, and really pushing the envelope of what imagination can show you.
Yeah, I think this is actually a very important subject in the history of art, because I think this type of idea of utilizing whatever it would be, narcotics or alcohol or substances that were hallucinogenic or whatever, was almost used right at the beginning. I mean, we do have evidence now that mycelium was being used by people of the prehistory, and that's what brought about communication and artistic prowess and sort of imagination, which was a huge story of how our art evolved as well. So it's an important one.
So this is the one. I think this is a Jasper Johns, right? So Jasper Johns forever sort of is a watershed moment, in when I looked at art. But to me, this is just sort of a fascinating way of looking at, mass production and looking at interpreting something that was a normal, icon and doing it in a different way. So mass production coming out of World War II, there was a lot of things that were suddenly available, which made art more available, and we sort of started this, what became the pop art movement. And I think we can see ourselves in the context of, the pop art movement, an extension of that. We see a lot of themes that run through what we're seeing even out here. And you'll see this is, for many, this is sort of like, one of the first people ever to do it. So for every time that we see people wearing American flags all over themselves, it wasn't necessarily a thing people did even before this, right? So this started saying, hey, it's okay. It's okay to express yourself in different ways.
Sophie, do you want to move to the next one? So yeah, I think this pop art, we entered into a period here where mass production imagery and almost a different sort of icon from years before. Now we're utilizing popular image of famous people from the time, who was being considered beautiful, who was being idolized, and then we come over to a Keith Haring that almost gives a much more sort of open and connective subject for everybody to adapt to, and it doesn't initially tell you that you have to be something to connect to this, whereas a Marilyn is almost like an idealization of how beauty should be. Maybe not, but this is a sort of image that most people would say, oh, there's a connotation with that. Whereas with the Keith Haring, there is an idea of people just having fun. There's movement. And it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what it is. It's everybody move, everybody have fun, everybody be happy. And then we have the Roy Lichtenstein here of a much more similar to an Andy Warhol of that sort of idea of what is fashion, what is pop, what is beauty, what is popular culture. And then we have other images of just, we get into a state of just not having to give an image of a real life thing, of a person or of a nature or of an object. We introduce the idea of letters and words into art. So we're radically changing in this period into an idea that art is becoming more than what it used to be thought of, and much more open to interpretation.
Yeah, the one thing you'll see here when we talked about collectibles, art really entered more into the collectible arena as opposed to collectors who had the most money and I get one and I hide it away. This made art accessible to a lot more people. So a combination of the technology and the thought process that went behind it. And at the time, fine art people like, that's not fine art. That doesn't fit in my gallery. That should not be in an auction house. And when you think about this, usually artists are about 20 to 50 years ahead of their time in terms of where they're going and how they're thinking about it. And even if you look at the collectors, most of the collectors out there that have the money are, well, they're even older than me. So they're late 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. So they're usually nostalgic. They're looking back in the time that was influential. So they're always behind the time. They're always behind the time. And I was talking to an artist last night. We were talking about if you ever wanted to invest in real estate, see where the artists are moving within 20 years, that's going to be the best real estate investment you've ever made. Artists are always pushing that envelope. So when we look at this, this was not accepted. This was, it wasn't even avant-garde. It was considered garbage at the time. It is not garbage now. So when we look at this, look for what they're telling us and what they're teaching us. And I've been telling people, in the context of the NFT world, what's about to happen. And I'll jump ahead a little bit. Just, it's my opinion. I lived through the Y2K bubble. I feel it's very familiar. I think what you're seeing is the first version of NFT art is a lot of JPEGs. It's standard digital art. It's experimenting with what's known. Within the next year, you're going to start seeing artists are going to doing a lot more collaboration. You're going to see different introductions of multimedia in there. You're going to see a lot more video combined with art. You're going to see physical and digital pairing together. You're going to see a lot of stuff. They're going to be pushing the envelope of existing technology that's out there and bringing in technology that's a little bit out there, but amazing. And this is where we are right now. And then what you're going to see, and this is what we saw in the movie industry, back from the 70s going forward, artists are going to drive new technology. We're going to be literally developing technologies because artists are going to say, I want to do something that seems wild and stupid and crazy, and they will be pushing the envelope of where all of our technology takes us. So, dare I say, for the people thinking the metaverse is something of the future and it's going to be, driven by large corporations, no. What that will become and where that will go, artists are going to drive us into that territory. I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen. It's going to be much more individual. It's going to be much more emotional. It's going to be driven based on privacy and interesting, intimate social experiences. So let's go to the next one, and we're just about to wrap up here. This is Andy Warhol. We could probably go fast. One of the first people to think about digital art, right? Once again, new thing. What's this thing on a PC? Once again, it wasn't considered fine art. Where are we now? Ahead of their time, but you're going to see, even as we have out here some late career artists, people that lived through this time, people in their 70s, are suddenly going, finally, the technology caught up to what I wanted to do forever. There's one guy over here, Jerome Gastaldi, talks to this idea of bridging, where he has physical works of art, and then he's got these amazing videos he's done. You're going to see a lot of interesting stuff out there, and it starts way back here. So you're talking about 70s and 80s. I'll hand it over.
So after that, we get to literally the news from 2 years ago, where this artist Beeple was coming into an auction at Sotheby's, and this was the first time the traditional art market was faced with an NFT. And people of the traditional art market really didn't know what to do. They were very confused. There was a lot of hype. Of course, in any auction environment, there's a lot of marketing involved. So, this was pushed out there to the traditional art market from an already very solid existing base of NFT artists. Beeple came on as the first NFT to be sold at auction. And this NFT ended up making $69 million. And it basically hit the whole art world by storm. And there was a huge after effects shocks that came through the entire globe. And I believe that this is a sort of a kickstart to where we are today, of a lot of people showing interest in this market, not necessarily just from the creative side, but we also always have to be aware that there is a commercial side to this as well, and anybody who thinks that somebody put some images together on a computer and sold it for $69 million is going to come running. So here we are today, filtering everything that's coming in, and we are at a stage where we need to really work out what is quality, what is story, what is art, and I think it's all about where we've come from, the storytelling behind art, what messages are we delivering, and we see with many different subjects of NFTs today, there is a very sort of a popular culture attached to it. There's almost a nostalgic idea of the 80s, 70s, of people understanding their collectibles as toys that seems to be capturing the entire middle generation of today. And here we are. And I'll pass you back to...
So I alluded to this before. NFTs, when I explain to fine art people, I'm like, this is a way, it's just a new way of distribution. So distribution channel, like lithographs were, or like wood panels were, or canvas. It's just a new way of looking at it. So it's really a very effective way of making things, tradable. It has some of, just like I say, in the early days of the internet, there was some security in, but it's not all there. And what we see, and it's both the good and the bad. When technology, sinks its teeth into something, it goes fast. And the people that usually are really fast into the IT world, there's two people. It's the porn industry is really fast to adopt technology, and then the other industry is crime and organized crime. They hop right in. So even as we look at this, like there's so much promise and potential here, but we'll just go to the last one. The one thing that Authentify is really trying to do as we talk about this is we want to make it safe and secure. We don't want to people scared off. We don't want like the initial conversation about, I don't know what it was, like $550 million of ETH being stolen. Like we've got to rethink this. We've got to just put enough of the barriers to protect it and make it ours. We've got to make sure that we're protecting artists. We have to make sure that people can make money off what they're doing. We have to make a safe environment. And it's not even unlike what Napster was to music in the beginning. We found a way to distribute digital technology and digital music in the same way. So I'll just leave with you this. We think that fundamentally, we're part of a movement. Authentify is just one party of it, a whole bunch of artists and a lot of players to really, as we say, stand up for art, make art the way it should be, make it protected, make it something that people connect with. And just one last piece of information. Only 3% of people that actually have money to invest anywhere, including the stock market, actually invest in art. That's 97% of the population has no art in any collection, any investment. We're focused on the 97%. And hopefully that's what this movement will start. We'll bring them all in. Thank you all. We'll see you later on.